What is the best amp modeler in 2024? Why does anyone care about this? Does Corey Taylor have an opinion? If you're a gear nerd like me, and well, of course you are, look at you, then this is a topic we could get into lengthy discussions on, considering all the variables and weighing all of the pros and cons, reducing every specification down to its most objectively measurable values, poring over market data and side questing into shipping opinions and poorly worded and misinformed global economic news that's definitely true because it's on Reddit. That's not what I'm gonna do here. I'm going to, as briefly as humanly possible, mention all of the modelers I own, their pros and cons as it relates to the family of modelers they come from, since each of these variations have pros and cons of their own. There are 6 Mac Daddy modelers, each have various bastardized children. I personally own 6 of these modelers, some are bastards. I'm gonna go through each in a very superficial way, tell you what is objectively good, what is objectively bad, and my personal main praises and gripes with each of them. But first, there's one gripe that I have with most of them. They all have different power sources. Some have these IEC cables, which are fine. I have those for a lot of things like amplifiers and studio hardware, monitors and whatnot. These are great, but a lot of devices, presumably to save production costs, have power supplies that go on the outside, like a Nintendo. Have we learned nothing since Nintendo?
These fucking things should be banned.
As a result, I have lost the power supply to my quad Cortex, which sucks because it's one of those very specific power supplies, but luckily today's sponsor was able to come through for me and make today's video happen. 𝐒𝐏𝐄𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋 makes various power supply solutions for various rigs. They have the DC7, the 8 expander, and the 4 expander, and the new 𝐒𝐿, which will be the one we'll be using in this video. With the 𝐒𝐏𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋 power supplies, you can change the voltage for each output individually and even daisy chain outputs together to achieve a higher amperage. The unit is powered by a standard IEC cable, which is super convenient, and each of the power leads uses these RCA style cables because they last longer and are more tough and have a better mechanical connection than the standard DC cables with a little pin in the middle, which I think is a cool feature. Speaking of tough, these units are built really well. They come in a full metal housing and feel like they are truly roadworthy. Each power output is isolated and balanced and includes LED monitoring, meaning the LED for the output will turn on and off or blink in certain patterns to let you know what's going on with your power if there's ever an issue. Every output offers 660 milliamps of power and is switchable between 9, 12, 15, and 18 volts, and all units have an ultra-low noise output due to their multi-stage filtering. All units also come with a 5-year worldwide warranty, and with the power supply I'm using in today's video, the 𝐒𝐿, all of this is packed into this little sleek 1-inch profile. So thank you to Sweetwater and 𝐒𝐿𝐄𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋 for sponsoring this video. Save yourself a basket full of unlabeled tangled cable nonsense and get one power supply to rule them all. Use the link down in the description, help out the channel, groovy. This is the quad Cortex. It is one of, if not the sleekest looking on this list. The quad Cortex is very easy to use with its simplistic design and touchscreen interface. Everything is very easy to read and navigate. It's also incredibly intuitive if you're used to using basic computer operating systems like Windows or Sonoma or whatever name Apple is using right now. However, on the negative side, despite their updates, the company has been slow to roll out promised launch features. What I personally like with the quad Cortex is the form factor and the operating system. It's easily my favorite modeler to navigate, and if ease of use is a high priority for you, then by all means. But my gripe is that I bought mine at launch and I'm just now getting to use the plugins on this unit. And I'll take full responsibility for this one, but when I heard plugin compatible, I kind of thought that with the beautiful full color touch display, they were going to use the same graphics from their apps, which are, in my opinion, god tier. Also, when I got it, there wasn't much on it besides the ability to use the capture feature and a very anemic effects selection. And sharing captures was sort of centralized through their own social media network. It's just not at all what I thought it was going to be when I pre-ordered it, and as such, it is literally sat in the corner collecting dust until the 3.0 update and this video. The quad Cortex sounds all of these modelers sound really good. Sound isn't really an issue for me. I think they all sound great if you know what you're doing and you know your way around them, which is a big part of what differentiates all of the units for me. So with the quad Cortex here, this is really user intuitive. I mean, you could just like click here, oh, we're gonna add something. Let's add a reverb. And then we have a good amount of reverbs on here. Look at this, look at all the reverbs we have. I like the shimmer reverb myself. You know, I think it sounds good. It's nice, it's a good one. There are tons of different effects in this unit as well. And on top of all of this stuff that you have with the quad Cortex, you can also capture analog gear. So if you have an amplifier that you really like, for example, you can actually capture it with this piece of gear. We also have Wi-Fi with this, which is outwardly maybe not the most impressive thing, but in its like actual everyday use, it's really awesome because you can just connect to your account over Wi-Fi. You can, you know, download patches. You can update over Wi-Fi if you want to. It is really nice to not have to go drag this thing over to a computer, plug it in, and then update it that way. You know, just to be able to do it all within the unit. It's a really, really big feature, I feel like. It's one of the things that I really like about it. On the flip side, on the con side of this, I know this sounds stupid, but like, I don't want to put this on the floor and step on it. You know, it's almost too nice for that. It has this very nice Apple-esque housing. It all looks and feels very, I just feel like I'm gonna ruin it if I step on it. And I know that it's built to be used on stage. It's probably fine. You can buy covers for them or whatever. But you know, it's like a little thing that I think about sometimes. The other thing with the Quad Cortex, and something that's maybe not even that big of a deal anymore, now that they have the update 3.0, which you can use the plugins in, is when it released, it felt kind of empty. It felt like they promised a lot and there wasn't really a lot there. And although they have been updating that, it's been several years, you know, it's taken to get these updates. So if you're looking to get one now, I'd say you're in a much better situation. It's a much better value proposition in 2024 than it was in 2021 or whenever it came out. I think there was so much hype when it released that many of us thought they would just take the same route as the Kemper, which is much more open in its rig sharing and selling ability, but they didn't really do that, and everything is sort of locked down through their own centralized database. There are ways around this if you want to sell captures, but it's definitely more of a hassle. I also feel like there's this pleasant sheen over everything, and this is tinfoil hat territory, but I always feel like my captures just sounded way more polished than the actual amplifiers I was capturing. And you might be asking yourself, why is that a bad thing? It's not a bad thing at all. What's a bad thing is me wasting a bunch of time trying to figure out how to describe something that might be my own delusional paranoia. So, Quad Cortex, sexy and expensive, just like your mom. I'm putting the Headrush Prime second on this list because if I didn't, how the f would you even know this thing existed? They had a big launch and then it doesn't seem like much happened after that. Maybe I'm just ignorant and there's a whole community of Headrush people with their millions of views on their videos. Hold on, let's do our due diligence. Okay, this is actually pretty decent. It seems like people are interested in this. I think this is sort of the dark horse in this race personally. The Headrush Prime is a completely competent and enjoyable unit. I remember saying that I really enjoyed Headrush Prime's clones, their version of captures, and having people mockingly laughing at me because I said that I think it was the best out of all of the units on this list that do that. We all know who those people are. They're Line 6 people. This is the Headrush Prime Core. This is my favorite iteration of the Headrush Prime family of products, and I like it because it's more compact than the Headrush Prime flagship unit, which is just way too big and heavy for me personally. We are using an amp clone, which is another one of the cool things about this unit. It has that capturing, cloning, you know, amp replicating technology. This is a clone I made of my VHT Deliverance 120. You can get this on their website. Where they are strong is they are a jack of all trades, easy to use, fully featured, and they do everything pretty well. The biggest con is they don't have an editing application. Like, what are we doing here? You have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but no app? It's a very odd choice since that's just the industry standard, but Headrush wants to die on that hill for some reason. So just so we're all on the same page, this is a pedal form factor, and if you want to use it, you have to lean down like this. No one likes that. No one likes doing this. Your only other choice is to put this up on your desk, and God forbid you go with the full-size flagship unit, which is just massive. I don't know, it's just a really odd choice. I made a video a while back about how I think that this is a really underrated piece of gear because I don't see a lot of people talking about it in the same way that I see a lot of people talking about the Quad Cortex or the Fender Tone Master Pro or whatever. This is a very, very capable unit, and this might have the best value proposition out of any of them. What I mean by that is the Headrush Prime Core comes in at $699, it's $700. It comes in at $700. For that $700, it might have the most flushed out feature set, meaning that you can use this unit, not a piece of software or something else. You can use this actual unit to capture, clone is their terminology, clone amplifiers. It has a ton of different effects, ton of different routing options. They did just release an update for this and add a few new pedals to it. I have not updated it yet, but it shows that they're actually supporting their product. And this also has a touchscreen user interface. It also has the more graphic looking icons on here, but you can switch these if you wanted to classic mode if you want the more contrasty, basic sort of look. We have Wi-Fi connectivity with the Headrush Prime for doing updates and stuff like that. The only thing the Headrush Prime family of stuff doesn't have is an editor. It's the weirdest thing ever, like, make an editor. Headrush, everything except the kitchen sink, or in this case, an editor. Next up is the Line 6 is sort of the Honda of amp modelers. What I mean by that is they are reliable. They also have a size for every scenario and a price for every budget. So much so that it can actually be a little maddening if you were just trying to buy something from them. Like, which HX thing do you want? The one with more buttons or less? How about a Pod Go? That's different. Slightly, their flagship Helix and all of its children, cousins, and in-laws have received regular updates since the first unit was launched in 2015, spanning nearly a decade of killer amp modeling and effects. But as such, it's starting to show its age. It doesn't have many of the features that current modelers have, like capturing or cloning or whatever, but it does have a massive selection of amps and effects. And even by today's standards, it still sounds great. This is the 𝐒𝐏𝐄𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋 XL. This is one of the oldest units on this list, and I think it's aged very, very well. In fact, I'm always really surprised when I plug this in that it still sounds as good as it does, at being nearly 10 years old at this point. You know? It's received several updates over its lifespan. It's received a lot of really cool stuff in those updates, new amplifiers, new effects, all sorts of things. Now, when it comes to these smaller units, they are pretty limited in their processing power. You cannot get a lot of effects in this change, and that is certainly true of the Pod Go, which is even a little bit more limited than this as well. But if you were looking at like a Helix or Helix LT, something like that, you can get a lot more effects in that signal chain. It's just something to consider. Oh, and if you're a fan of Rev amplifiers, they actually have licensed Rev models in here, so that's pretty cool. That's what we were actually just playing through. Let's go into the reverb. Let's go with something like this dynamic bloom. It's one of the newer ones that they added in. I know the operating system is usually praised, but it's another area where I feel like Line 6 is showing its age. It makes me wonder if Line 6 will release something new soon, and if it will have a touchscreen and be similar to the Quad Cortex, since, let's be honest, they basically copied Line 6's homework on the user interface.
You realize what would happen if I hand in my homework in your handwriting? I'll get kicked out of school. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? Would you?
Well, now of course not.
No.
This used to be the most user-friendly interface on the market. But now that all of these units have started using touchscreens, culturally we're more familiarized with touchscreen operating systems and things like that, I feel like the newer units are a bit ahead on that mark. But I want to shoehorn in this extra little thing because I think it's really important. I believe they were the first to cross the plugin/hardware boundary with the Helix native software. This is something that only they do on this list, unless you count the two plugins the Quad Cortex currently has, but that's not really the same thing. Essentially, with Helix native, you could completely recreate your patches in the software so that your hardware would mirror the software and vice versa. You can have your tones out there and in here. So the Helix, still holding strong after all these years, just like your mom. This is not only the unit, but the brand I have the least familiarity with. So it's a lot harder for me to be objective here, but I'll just explain my experience thus far. I think the Kemper ecosystem, or maybe the community if you want to look at it that way, is the coolest. What I mean by that is the fact that this unit's premise is to build guitar rigs that you can share with other people, or God forbid, sell and try to make back a little bit of the money that you spent on the unit. You can do that. Now this is the unit that I have the least familiarity with, so I went to my friend who is very familiar with all things Kemper, and that is what you're hearing right now. You are hearing Amp Guru Profiles. This is a wizard, I think. I said this with the Helix as well. This is actually the oldest technology, I guess, because the technology in this hasn't really advanced since the Kemper toaster or the rack units. You know, from 15 years ago or whenever they came out. This technology is pretty much the same, and it sounds very good. Like, it's aged very well. I like the feel of the unit. Everything is very nice. Everything feels very high quality. And this comes in at $700. When you stack this up against something like the Headrush Prime Core, you get a lot more features and value for that money. However, if you're into the Kemper profile and that ecosystem, which is very open, like you can just buy profiles. It's been around a long time. It's paid its dues. Now with the Kemper Profiler player, one of the things that people complain about is that there isn't as many effects and there's not as many blocks on every signal chain as there is on the Kemper. And since I'm not familiar with that, I can't really speak to it, but I can tell you it is lacking in effects compared to everything else. We have 4 reverbs, you know? We have 3 delays, and they're all very basic sort of stuff. We have transpose tool here. That doesn't mean the effects sound bad. That just means that there aren't that many of them to choose from. But again, if you're a Kemper user, you're looking for something that's way more convenient to travel around with. You have your profiles that you like. This might be a good option for you. In a way, it feels kind of open source, but it still has all of the benefits of a major amp modeling company. It receives regular updates, and the people that stay up to date with them seem totally satisfied. The Kemper player experience specifically was nice because I appreciate that this takes up very little space. It makes it very easy for me to get in and out when I want to use it on a whim. I also like the finish and the feel of the unit. This and the Quad Cortex, in my opinion, are kind of tied on their feel and how much enjoyment I get when tweaking knobs on them. I also really appreciate that this has modern connectivity and I can get even more control with an app. It's a really clever way to hide the tech and give a pedal which is more analog feeling, which is something that I really like. The only downside to me with this unit is I think the user interface and even just the way the rigs are built is really dated. And despite the modernization through the app, I still don't find the navigation or rig building intuitive or easy. And I'm going to chalk that up to that's the one I'm the least familiar with, and all of the more current units have sort of established an agreed upon way of building signal chains. With the Kemper, it's just a little bit different, and I had to read the manual and do a couple YouTube searches for things because I got stuck. Also, the Kemper player comes in at $700, which is cool, but that price also comes with the inability to create profiles. So in a way, it feels like a compromise you are making and not as much of a smaller, more affordable way to get into the ecosystem. People speculate they may update that, but as of right now, that's where it is. Kemper. It feels like driving a very old and very expensive car that your grandfather garaged during the war. Next on the list is the... How do you even talk about the Axefx or Fractal for that matter without sounding overly pretentious? I've caught myself explaining my live signal chain to people, only to realize their eyes glaze over into the back of their heads when I start talking about splitting the output signals so that I have IRs to the front of house while being able to use on-stage cabinets for all three instruments. Yes, I use it for all three of them live to both go to front of house with my impulse responses and direct for my solid-state power amp and 4x12 cabinet, because I'm that person who still can't live without pissing off the sound guy. This is the Fractal Axefx 3. It needs no introduction. This has been a staple of the amp modeling world for a long time. Not the Axefx 3, but, you know, Fractal audio and you know what I'm talking about. It'd probably be better if I just start dialing things in here and showing you kind of my main gripe with this unit, and most people's main gripe with this unit. This is your signal chain, and every block in your signal chain from the input all the way to the output has to have something in it in order for you to get your signal from the input to the output. So use these things called shunts. A shunt is just a basic line. Why it doesn't just do that by default, I don't know. I guess it's like for routing purposes. That's one of the main advantages of this unit, is how kind of in-depth the routing is. Now we do have a crazy amount of controls here. We have like all sorts of filtering, EQ. There's a boost option in the amp block, so you don't need to take an extra block to use a boost. This one is the 808 modded boost. You can see it's on there. We can do all sorts of different things. Saturation drive, saturation switch. We can change our preamp tubes down here if we want. Change different parameters with the preamp tubes, like the fat cut switch. I mean, you can get into the weeds on this thing. And this also can be a negative with the Axefx because it's so deep, you can really do anything that you can think of with it. You really can. It's kind of nuts. It's an overachieving, self-deprecating child in every sense. Look, you've won the game. You do the most things, the most thorough, with the most processing power. Anyone who is serious about their craft uses you, but you forgot one thing. In your quest to find out if you could, you never stop to ask yourself if you should. That is my way of saying this thing is a mess to navigate. Without normal daily or even weekly use, my muscle memory forgets how to navigate the text-heavy user interface, and I start moving shunts and disconnecting my signal path before I figure out what the hell happened and have to start all over again. Let's say we just want a reverb, right? And click on this reverb. No. I'm messing up already. See, I messed something up again. Oh, look, I'm on cab. Okay, so what do I need to do here? I need to go to... Okay, the Axefx notoriously has a difficult to use interface. I'm not breaking new ground, but there could be one easy way to fix this. Make the editor into an app. Seriously, I don't know why this isn't a thing. While the Axefx doesn't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth built in like some of the others, and it likely won't because all of these companies have these weird hills they'd rather die on, the editor makes the Axefx experience amazing. It fixes the one glaring problem the Axefx as a modeler has, and that's the aggravation of actually using it. And just a quick note here, I am aware of FracPad, and I am aware that you can use a Bluetooth MIDI device to connect to the back of the Axefx unit, and I've tried this, and while it's very cool and it sort of solves the problem for me, it just makes me think, why doesn't Fractal do this themselves? If they released their own application and it wasn't a third party, and they built Bluetooth in the Axefx and made the experience more seamless without having to spend an extra $100 or whatever you have to spend on the app and the Bluetooth module, it would just be way better. This is my live set. We have different scenes. Scenes are essentially preset states that you can quickly switch to. So I have like my rhythm, my leads on here, clean, whatever. my lead sound. I have this flangey thing that I use for 2 seconds in our set. In my personal opinion, I think the Axefx sounds the best out of any unit, and I'm also a huge fan of the amount of support that it receives. Since I purchased mine, so about 4 or 5 years I think, I've had several major updates, and I know, you're like,
oh, the updates must be nice. Did they release some new pedal models or something?
How about redoing all of the algorithms the amp modeling is based on, you
Fractal really goes above and beyond for its community, unless it's features they actually want. Fractal, if you can imagine it, you can spend hours menu diving for it. Lastly, we have the new kid on the block. This is the hardest to give information on because the product is so new. Sure, it's got the name brand of Fender behind it, and with their affiliation or ownership with EVH, they are the first amp modeler to have a licensed EVH product in the unit. The user interface is also super intuitive. They went the safe route with the virtual signal path. They also went with the aesthetic of a visually accurate signal path with icons that resemble the actual gear you're using. While this is my preference, I know it's not for some, and they want the high contrast, easy to see on stage icons. With that being said, unlike the Headrush Prime, you can't change the icons to a dumbed down high contrast version. Yet anyway. I say yet because it's so new and we really don't know what's in store for it. There has been criticism that it released with lackluster amp selections and that it wasn't fully fleshed out like other amp modelers it was in the same market as, but I don't feel that way about it. And as opposed to something like the Quad Cortex launch, I thought Fender came with a fair deal of amplifiers and a lot of different effects and stomp boxes and whatnot. I would have preferred a few more amps, especially with the EVH licensing, but I thought it was still really well rounded. I did, however, think it was a little odd they didn't incorporate any sort of amp capturing tech, since that seems to be the new thing that everyone is doing now. But still, aesthetically, this is true to the Fender brand from the little details like the knob/foot switch encoder selection. These are so cool and so much fun to twist, and that for me is a big thing. Okay, I'm plugged into the Tone Master Pro. We have some crazy effect going on here. You know, the Tone Master Pro, again, one of these units that has a very easy to use, simple interface. This is way dialed back from something like the Axefx or even the Quad Cortex for that matter. This would be more in the realm of easier to use for your average consumer. And also if you're a sucker for the graphics interface like I am, I really like this unit a lot because of that. There has been some criticism in the past that, you know, the EVH amp doesn't sound really that great in this, or like the amplifiers are a little bit lacking. I personally don't agree with these criticisms. I think that this unit sounds excellent, and especially when you use it this way, through an actual power amp and cabinet. I think that it rips, dude. It sounds so good. And while it might not have a crazy amount of options as something like the Axefx, I think that we have more than enough to get the job done here, and it's all stuff that I find personally inspiring. Again, a lot of that has to do with the interface, the graphics interface. These knobs being encoders, I really like these. I think that's kind of, you know, a big consideration when you're going through all these different units. Like, which one speaks to you? Because you probably get away with doing what you need to on any of them, in all honesty, but the one that you're going to want to play, I think that that has a lot of weight. I really like the way everything is organized on the Tone Master Pro as well. It's all very simple. What it seems like they did is try to recreate the experience of what it's like to use analog gear. Like if you walked into a room like this and picked out an amplifier and you picked out some pedals and you had to hook them all up and everything like that. That's kind of what it's like. And you know, if you are used to doing things that way, then I think that this is going to be very, very intuitive for you. I like using this. I like dialing in guitar tones and playing with different effects chains, and they have had a few decent updates since launching last year. So I'd say if Fender is your thing and you like the simple, easy to use UI, the visual realism of the interface, but are okay without amp capturing or cloning or whatever, then Fender might be your jam. Fender, the classic that never goes out of style, but only has one EVH model for some reason. So there you have it. Every modeler has its own merits and drawbacks, and a lot of times people ask me which one sounds the best, as if that's what they're basing their purchase on, and I'm like, all of them. because they can all sound excellent if you know what you're doing. To me, it's always more about the one that fits your budget, does all the things that you want it to do, and most importantly, which one speaks to you. I mean, you are going to be the one using it. Do you want simple-ish app-type icons, or do you want visual recreations of actual gear? Does capturing matter to you? Does having encoders that double as foot switches matter? These are all things to consider. Shout out to Sweetwater and 𝗏𝐿𝐿 for making this happen. You know the deal. Use the link, help the channel, say hi to your mom for me. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you really like it, consider subscribing or joining these beautiful people over here on Patreon, and I will see you later, or I will see you on another time.